เ Welcome everybody to another task analysis segment, and this week's task is obviously task number 5, and as always I'm joined by Small and One to analyze the top 4 this week.
Hi there.
Task number 5 took place in Bowser's Kingdom, and the objectives were to kill 2 enemies, collect 3 purple coins, and spawn in a moon after warping to any checkpoint. And looking at some runs I was able to time, I actually saw some really cool, interesting ideas. I'm not sure how many of them made it into top 25. I'm pretty sure at least 2 routes made it in, because there was another pretty fast route. But as always, actually before we look into top 4, it's gonna be the typical Limcube question. Smaller, what made you think of the specific route and kingdom as well?
I just really felt like having a task here, so I went in, just looking around. There isn't anything incredibly unique about Bowser's Kingdom that makes it stand out, but I was looking around and I noticed there's a lot of enemies, and there's a lot of different ways to kill the enemies. There's like the Pokios, where you have to take the hats off first. You can kill the ogres as well. There's also Spinies, so I saw that there were a lot of different types of enemies with unique ways of killing them, and so I figured that would be an objective. And the next one that I added was, I believe, spawning a moon, because there's actually, I noticed there's a ton of different ways to spawn moons in the kingdom. There's like, they're in the boxes, there's you can kill the UFO, there's the bird right near the start. There's just a bunch of different ways to spawn a moon, and so I figured that would be a unique objective. There's a lot of different ways of doing that. And then just to round it all off, I figured to include some regionals, because we haven't really had regionals and tasks yet, and there's a lot of regionals in a lot of different places in Bowser's Kingdom, so I figured that would extend the task a little bit more and add some more interesting movement into it. And that's pretty much it. That's how I came up with it.
For sure, and as always we have 4 people here that figured out the best checkpoint potentially, and then also the best execution, lining up all the objectives to come up with a optimal run. And this is our top 4 this week. Miles Pro, winning task number 5. Going back at the throne, I think Miles Pro should probably currently be first overall. He's definitely been doing pretty well throughout the season. But second place, Nathan Heath, and I know he has just recently been getting into tasks. I remember a YouTube comment from him in like season 2 when he said he would never be able to keep up with all the speedy boys. But hey, I guess he put in the time and managed to get second place here. Very while still being close to Miles, it is worth to say that Miles still ended up winning by quite a lot. We got Zenrave on 3rd and Zivla on 4th, but now let's see what they actually do. it's as usual. We actually have two similar routes, similar approaches. The route is obviously the same. The big difference that we see between Miles and Nathan against the other two is both of them, after everybody starts off first of all by doing this road cancel into the Pokio, and then Miles and Nathan do a spin throw to collect the purples. However, Miles actually doesn't do any ground pound, just falls down all the way, which actually probably ended up causing him the win, because Nathan pretty much did the exact same, but he had to do a ground pound to get his roll off of the little ledge where he got the purples from, losing him quite a bit of time there.
Yeah, that's really the only difference here is that ground pound, which probably lost around 0.5 seconds. He had to wait for the ground pound animation to start to get to that maximum fall speed, and then when he hits the ground again after he gets the purples, or the regionals, he has to roll off and get back to that fall speed a second time. So that's probably where most, if not all of the time loss came in there.
I think it's also notable to say that Zen, Rave, and also Zivler did a strat that actually ended up being the fastest in the first task last season, which also took place in Bowser's, which is the so-called like dive back strat, where they basically threw Cappy back, then turned around and quickly went for a dive, which is actually a strat that's also used in any percent in Bowser's Kingdom, kind of to grab something that is far away. But in this case, it was just better to go for the spin throw that captured everything optimally. And since they had to dive so early, they also ended up falling a little bit slow. As far as I'm aware, a dive causes you to fall slower than just normally falling.
Yeah, that extra cap throw in the middle of their fall, where it just stops all of their fall speed, it definitely lost some time too.
Yeah, that wasn't really needed. It seems like they ended up diving pretty far away from the Ogre. And this is something when we look at Miles, who's actually winning by quite a lot if we look at the comparison here. His moon is spawning in so much earlier. He kind of abuses the possibility of just falling straight for pretty much until the end, and just barely dives at the end. And even his dive even lands on top of the Ogre, so he dives for almost no time. Just at the very end, dives on top of the Ogre, maybe dives for like 0.3 seconds, so this like fall speed decrease doesn't really hit him much, I feel like.
Yeah, really minimizes the amount of time he's falling with that dive for sure. It just barely lands on the top of the Ogre to get across. That's cool.
And after all, a good old rule that I heard you say, and I remembered it ever since, I think it was in one of your task videos, comes into play again. If you can fall, it's usually good. And this is exactly what happens here again. You kind of basically complete the task by just falling down. And even though there's different fall speeds, most of the time just falling is actually the best. And this one, once again, shows off why. It's kind of a straight line and it's also falling. So this route ended up being pretty fast. I really also liked watching the other route, the route with the key to spawn in the moon. Because people did like the spin pound down, which that's actually the fastest way of falling. You couldn't have really done that here because you obviously needed to collect the purples and still work your way over to the Ogre. But also very awesome route. But once again, I think this is something that made people explore the kingdoms again. I think actually not everybody in this that runs this game is like a speedrunner, for example, actually has the best knowledge about all of the moons. I personally, for example, have yet to 100% the game. And a kingdom like this kind of makes you revisit Bowser's Way, which moons actually spawn in. And now after watching some routes, even stuff like the bird is something that people did. A little bird that technically spawns in the moon. And we got the crate in the moat down there, the Ogre here, the key. There was a bunch of interesting options. But after all, we ended up with Miles Pro. On top again, Zenrave also coming back strong. I'm interested to see how this season is gonna wrap up, but this was only week number 5. And we still have 3 tasks to go. So that obviously makes me curious. Smallhead. Now what's task number 6 gonna be?
Task number 6 will be in Snow Kingdom.